All right, we're going to go to Acts chapter 20.
Proverbs 18.
21st chapter of Isaiah.
First Chronicles, and we're going to be in the 16th chapter this evening.
Obadiah. 141st Psalm this morning.
So we first heard about Parkland Chapel through Todd McKinney, and it was actually before Mike and Lucinda ever moved back here. At the time, we were involved in another church, and we didn't want to make the switch. We were probably a little nervous about non-denominational. We put a lot of faith in the denominational churches.
Our kids were going to St. Paul, and so were the Harrison kids, and Kyle met Mike in the hallway at St. Paul one morning.
Mm-hmm. I was asked to play this musical instrument that I used to make for the little kids, the little giants, is that what they were called? And Lucinda was one of the teachers of those classes. And then after I had played my instrument, I guess she went home and told Mike about this guy that played this really weird drum, and you should, introduce yourself to him. And then it was that next day after I had played my drum for these little kids that he actually introduced himself, and we started talking. As soon as I got in my truck and was heading home or wherever I was going, I called Lori and I said, hey, I want to go to Parkland Chapel this weekend.
So yeah, we started in 11, but probably should have started in the basement. So.
So when we started coming in 2015, it was a much smaller congregation. I would say there was 50 to 100 people maybe in a service.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
There was 2 separate buildings, one where we had service and then one for children's church.
The 2 buildings, Lynette would walk out when she would bring the kids over to the Sunday school with that stop sign.
Yes. Yep. We'd drive through there, and then Lynette would have her stop sign, and the children would walk from building to building.
And there was 2 services? No, just one.
It was 2.
It was 2 services, but it wasn't very busy.
Yeah, our kids were in this building that we're in, and we were over there. It was facing the long way, this way.
Coming here, I used to think, honestly, when people were talking about it, I was like, it's kind of weird, They're having it in an old dilapidated building. Used to sitting in church pews, or and now we're sitting in chairs.
And Mike sat in a chair, and I had never been anywhere that the pastor was sitting in a chair on stage.
It wasn't behind a pulpit.
Right, yeah.
The sound booth was there was a little cutout window for it. That's the first time I ever saw Eric Parrott, was sitting at a desk looking through this hole in the wall. And Mike was down at the end. There was a little hallway to the right of the sanctuary going all the way down to the end, steps down to the kids.
The music was awful. We had come from a church that had fantastic high level music, and we came here and the music was like Randy Travis singing Christian music.
And we liked the music because we were just used to contemporary style music in St. Louis, so I feel like around this area we didn't experience that so much, so we really enjoyed that part of it too.
I've grown. I know that's not how you judge a church now.
that didn't bother me.
Yeah, it didn't
She was
bother
surprised, like me, a music guy, that really would have been a reason to not come back.
It was more like acoustic. It was not it's not anything like it is today, but it was like we were singing songs that were on Joy FM, So it felt a little bit more contemporary. We weren't opening up the hymns. Yeah.
We knew this is where we were going to be because we'd already experienced the deep fellowship. And so throughout the week when we hang out with all the friends here, it just confirmed when we came that we would stay an hour and a half just talking with people after service. That deep fellowship with real people is what really makes us connect more.
Coming here was just so different. Instead of, being preached at to being taught, and the way that Mike taught with, visual images of maps of the place where the story he was teaching about was taking place, and history lessons about where in time we were while this particular story was happening. And all those things just added to the realness of the Bible.
And we got to see, our pastor do the worm on stage.
I'd like to show you a baby Luke style push-up.
That's what really, really kept us here.
I clenched it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, and I can still do the worm. You like that? Watch this.
I think I was at a point where God was really after me, like it was time to dig in and learn the Bible. Like I'd been in church all my life and I didn't know the Bible, and I was seeking that. I mean, looking back on it, I see that. I was really seeking it. I was like, hey, do you have any Bible studies? Is there anything I can, what do I need to do? And we had parenting classes and we had other classes, but there was no Bible. And man, when that started, that's what changed my life.
I'm a history guy. I like history, so it was really interesting to me. I had read the Bible before, but it didn't sink in. I guess you could say I didn't really understand. I was just reading it, again, checking a box. So, seeing the Bible basically come to life and explaining how it, what it means and everything like that was what really interested me.
And I think the relationships that we made with the people along the way, because it was like a family.
They say that what you win people with is what you win them to. And so the same thing that brought us here to Parkland Chapel is the same thing that kept us here, and that was that the mission of Parkland Chapel to exclusively teach the Bible in a way that is simple and that is accessible and that's applicable and relevant, not just intellectual, sword drill Bible knowledge, but actually relevant to our lives. And so there were a lot of challenges to overcome in those early days when we first came here, but in spite of all that, I always got the impression that if this church sticks to its guns, to the distinctives that it was grounded on, that it's going to make an impact on this community and not just produce more churchy religious people, and that was very attractive to me.
I think there was a couple things that definitely made us stay. First, the Bible teaching was different than anything we had ever done. So just to go through the entire Bible, like Pastor Mike always says, it takes a whole Bible to be a whole Christian. So I thought that was the number one thing that really brought us back. The people, just ever since we've been coming in 2015, the people are just solid. Down to earth, solid Christians, huge hearts, people that want to serve. And that's really what makes up a church, is the body of Christ.
I would say the people, people are just transparent and open and genuine, and that's something that I hadn't experienced before.
To say what stuck it's hard to say. It just
Other
did.
than the sermon that Mike gave that day, where he was at, and I don't even remember which book we were in at that point. But
it's pretty amazing looking back, because Mike was going through a lot of health issues at that time, but Jesus was still talking through him to us. So.
Right, and so I've heard him say in several messages, like I was, torn up from the floor of then, and nothing was, and yet that is when he touched our lives and never looked back.
We had not been coming here for very long when there was an issue with a worship leader and making some poor choices and things that were just not morally correct. And because we were so new here, we didn't yet know all of the main people or know the ins and outs of what was going on. So we just show up to church one Sunday like normal, and Mike I don't think he taught that week at all.
No, it was not
actually.
a normal Sunday. Yeah.
I think that he just got up in front of the congregation and shared a little bit about what had gone on, and in full honesty, just so
transparency, complete.
So everyone knew what was going on and knew how it was being handled. And Kyle and I just thought that was amazing, because I've been in church all my life and seen a lot of churches that would have ran like that, would have hid that, would have shoved it under the rug, and that was very impactful for us.
Absolutely.
In respecting Mike and the church.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we knew that this was the place for us, especially after that.
Knowing how they were caring for some of the parties that were involved that were not at fault too, that was huge to see as well.
Yeah, and you know, that's what I remember about it, is Todd being so nervous that was gonna, because we were new, you know, kind of newish at the time, and he was afraid it was gonna affect, and I'm like, you know, people are human, and just the way they handled it was so wonderful, you know. They just didn't hide it, you know, they just explained what happened, and this is how we're gonna take care of these people. And
the risk of making that public, because it was, the leaders had a public face, and so it was dealt with publicly. But the way Mike and the board decided to handle it, we both appreciated. And as far as I know, that was that. It was addressed one time, and other than talking about it right now, it was dealt with, and that was that.
I just always like Agape Feast. It's got to be like an example of what's going to happen in heaven when we're all celebrating. Kids are running wild, and there's just an infectious joy in the building.
Yeah, the one that stands out the most is when Linked Union played at the Alexanders, and all those little kids were out there just cutting a rug, and that was awesome. Yeah.
It was just people everywhere. And then there was some musicians that were playing, and then, you know, we did what we do. We would sit down and eat, and then just stop in the middle of it and take communion. I'd never experienced any of that quite in that way.
And there was no rooms, so it was all big open space, but it was just this small second building.
Yeah, which has kind of been a tradition, because just about every year up until recently, we've always been, whatever space that we had Agape Feast, we were always packed.
I think a big one for me was when they did the New Year's Eve event here. It was so much fun. And it was just like, that was one of those times when, you know, earlier years, New Year's Eve, you think like drinking, bars, you know, all of that. And this was a building full of people that were not drunk, but full of joy. And like, it was just like one of those like moments for me that, wow, you don't have to have the alcohol to have fun, because you're just here like in the moment with all these people just having a good time.
She just played one last night.
Yeah,
She sent one to our
Colton
the family.
and Nathaniel sang Hello by Adele.
It was horrible.
It's so bad.
Were you here when Mike, did Mike drop Luke?
Yes. Well, or yes. Remember he was singing and yes. That was.
I don't remember it.
One of them was in like a wolf hat kind of deal.
Brian was like, God's not dead. He was like jumping all over the chairs. You remember that?
Yeah. Jared sang Jesus Freak.
Yes. And
knew every word.
Joe.
Oh, Joe Samples sang the
Chainsaw.
chainsaw. That was actually really good.
That was good.
When Joe and Jack got baptized together in the pond was really awesome, and Jace was trying to get in the pond with them, so that was a very fun memory.
That's when the pond wasn't a real popular place to get baptized.
but our kids made it so yeah, that was great, and made it fun that day anyway. It wasn't, we didn't have the pretty beach at the time.
Personally, I love the women's like progressive dinners that we've done. I just think those are super fun. It's a way to like meet lots of women, eat good food, and just like talk and fellowship over food. So I've really enjoyed those.
Another thing that I've really liked, and I think we've all enjoyed as a family, are the night of worships.
Oh yeah, those are
to see the entire church in one building, to see what the Holy Spirit can do in those situations. It's just been really neat. Our kids are up by the stage enjoying it, smiling, laughing, having a good time. So we've really enjoyed those. It's pretty neat.
The church bought the Friendly
Oh,
and
yes,
put
that-
under new management.
There's a good memory.
That might be my favorite memory. Yes.
So one of the reasons that we made the change and came to Parkland Chapel before we had our daughter was because I wanted to be able to bring my family into a church where we could fully get behind the philosophy and the mission of the church without reservation. And so that's been a big deal for us.
It just caused us, all to grow closer to the Lord, and just, watching my kids grow up in a church like this to where, they're following the Lord at a young age, which is probably not that unusual, but for me, it didn't happen till, late 30s, early 40s, so they're growing up and doing things completely different than what me and my friends were doing at their age.
Well, yeah, we've had kids since being at Parkland Chapel. We came to Parkland Chapel with no kids, and I've had 2 kids since we've been here.
Yeah, I think it's changed a lot. Obviously, our kids have grown up in this church. That's all they've known. Children's church, Lynette and Brian do such a good job. So to see our kids grow through that, and I really think it's made us as a family focus on what matters.
That's hard to answer because in every way, I would say it has changed everything.
Prayer of like before we came here, and that's really you were talking about what brought us here too. Like even when they were inviting us, we were like, oh, we're fine at our church, But if I needed somebody to pray for me, it was those guys that I was calling. And I think that's what in our family, it wasn't always our go-to when something went wrong, and now that's the first thing anybody does when something.
And then when you look at my family as a whole, a number of years after we started attending Parkland Chapel, my brother and his wife and kids started coming. And then a year or 2 after that, my dad and my mom started attending. So it's pretty neat to see my entire family here now, and just to see how everyone's faith has grown and just be able to worship with all of them in the same place.
I think, we put, the Lord and the gospel in the center of our marriage, and, we actually pray about things instead of just making a decision because it's the decision we want to make. Right. We actually try to be led by the Spirit in certain ways, and quite honestly, to me, I think having the Lord in the center of our marriage, we don't really even have any arguments. So it's actually pretty neat.
Yeah. The kids were so small when we started here. They were 3 and 5, I think. So before that, we just went to church on a Sunday morning, and that was it,
Yeah, there was, for me, check the box. I attended church before Parkland Chapel, and that's all I can say about that. My life, my walk, my faith began here.
I also feel like just being here, it's like allowed us to, be better parents because we're in the Word and we're studying and we're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing. So it's like helped our own, nuclear family dynamic in that way.
Being a part of God's fellowship here at Parkland Chapel has changed how I do family life, in that it has taught me to be more vulnerable even with the people that are closest to me, and they know me the best, but I can also trust that the Lord will use any, mistakes or vulnerabilities to connect, but also to keep me dependent on Him.
This is our people. It's our life, it's our family, it's everything about how our day goes, our week goes. Yeah, how can I say that any better?
I feel like a big turning point for me was like I grew up in church, and I've always, been in church, consider myself a Christian my whole life, but I truly didn't realize that people like read the Bible at home and like would read through the whole Bible. So that was like a major turning point for me when I guess I just realized like it takes the whole Bible to be a whole Christian, and like you have to be in God's Word at home and not just once a week on Sundays. And that like truly impacts your whole life. Like once you see that, incorporate that daily, then yeah, your life just changes.
The Lord was so good and blessed us, and the growth of the business and early successes that were kind of shocking to a lot of people out there. But it got to the point where He was no longer blessing what was going on. And it was in really an inverse of my walk with Him. So when I started my company, I believed in God, but I didn't know Jesus. The company was an idol, was a god to me, and I thought I was doing it for noble reasons to try to provide for my family and do good work because of these instruments I made. I thought that they were good for people or could be good for people. But living in a way, not knowing Jesus yet, thinking that I'm doing something special for humanity. It's like laughable if it wasn't so serious, thinking back to those days. And to probably the outside looking in, the drum world or whatever, could see that I left something that was thriving.
During a Wednesday night service early on in what is now the youth room, before we had the new sanctuary, there was just a normal Wednesday night service, and Jared was up there singing with the worship band, and I came to a point where I had to let go of what I expected of my own life, and in that worship set was just the songs that the Lord used to minister, and it was a turning point in that I let go of what I expected, what I thought my life should look like, and I realized that the Lord was calling me into a difficult time, but a beautiful time.
I used to like to talk about myself.
He did a lot, really a lot.
Especially when it came to these drums, right? It was my identity. Being successful and being really good at them, either as a drummer or making the drums, I started to believe the hype. I was always thankful to God for any ability that was given to me by Him to do this work, but I never once back then thanked Him for the prosperity of it. I thought that was my part. And I think is when I finally realized that, and it was shocking, scary, and from that moment things started to change.
That pivotal moment was when I decided that I would rather live with God in the hard and the painful times than have an easy life without Him.
Yes, I could still be doing that work, but it would be literally in vain. It would be kicking the goads, started the process of letting it all go. And it's been 2.5 years, to the point where I don't know, it's been a process. It wasn't overnight, but I admit I probably hedged in a couple areas And just a couple weeks ago, he said, cut the ties and burn the ships. And I was still doing some maintenance work and other things. And he wants me to, like he said originally, let it all go. It's taken 2.5 years, but that's what I'm trying to be obedient and actually follow through.
The big turning point for me is, we started in the spring of 2015, and then it was in the fall sometime of 2015 where I was just trying to gobble up any little crumb, that, some of these men around here would leave behind, because I wanted to be like them. I wanted to live my life like them. And so we were at home one evening, and just out of the blue, Colton, or Jeb, said, you know what, Dad? He goes, you've really changed since you started hanging around with Mike and those guys. He said, you don't even cuss anymore or anything. So, and he was 7 or 8 years old at the time, and for, a 7 or 8 year old to notice that you're a different person, it was just amazing to me. And I'll never forget that.
I think a turning point for me was, like I talked about earlier, going to camp in 2019. So I kind of had what at the time we would kind of joke and say I was having a midlife crisis in 2018, because I had been a physical therapist for 20 years, I guess. And all of a sudden, I just didn't want to do it anymore. So this was in 2018, which was his biggest year ever in the business. And so we decided that I was going to quit my job.
Probably one of my greatest ongoing personal struggles is trying to separate what I do occupationally from who I am as a person and as a child of God. And so there's a lot of turbulent just revolutions involved in that. But I've just been so grateful to be in an atmosphere where that particular spiritual battle is not only understood, but it's addressed openly, and you might even say aggressively, to the good, to the better.
So I quit my job, and I think my last day was October 31st of 2018, and then, like he said, in January of 19, his business started declining hugely.
Whatever you want to call it.
And he's freaking out, and I'm like,
I was.
No, it wasn't just that I didn't want to be a physical therapist at that time. It was that the Lord had told me, I've forgotten the specific words he told me, but I was driving past here on my way home one day, and basically he told me it was time to be done at that job at that time. And so then when the business started going down, and he's like, what are we going to do? My first inkling my whole life would have been, well, I got to get another job, because I would have just thought I could fix it. Mm-hmm. But I knew that was not what the Lord wanted.
I think for the most part, we've just continued to grow in our faith as it, from where we started. We just continued to try to grow in our faith. But I've had a lot of aha moments that I would have had no idea. But now I see, with the trials and the difficult times, okay, that's what God was preparing me for. And just a lot through the years that I would not, not that would have changed the circumstances, but how we've dealt with it as a family have very much changed by growing deeper in our faith because of Parkland Chapel.
Appreciated her faith and obedience. And so, what we would have robbed the Lord of, and the growth in our own walks by trying to solve it in our own way. Had we given in, had she given in and gone back to work,
and
the story would be different by now.
Just that whole time period, was that the Lord was just really working in both of our lives, and I started feeling like I was supposed to be doing more in ministry, and I wanted to, and I was kind of waiting for someone to ask. And then it was that summer that they asked me to go to camp with youth, and so then we started helping with youth. And so during all this crap that was going on, work-wise, the Lord was really working in both of us behind the scenes.
And what He has for us is so much better than we could invent for ourselves. And to finally be at a place to trust that and understand that it's not just life-changing, it's eternity-changing.
If I had any encouragement for the next generation, it would be to step into what God has called you to do and do it without fear.
Something I always say, especially to the younger guys that I know, is just like, men, lead your family. Lead them to church, lead them to the Lord. Because if you're not leading them to the Lord, you're leading them to hell, basically.
I would encourage them to continue to dive into the Word daily. I know that's what the pastors always encourage us as a congregation every year, to continue to work, to read and to grow, and then to get involved in a ministry if you haven't gotten involved in one, and then just to continue to be on fire for the Lord and be a light in the community.
Yeah, I would also say, like, whenever you feel convicted of something, like the Holy Spirit's convicting you of it, and you should just be bold and go do it, whether it's comfortable or not.
Just encouraging by saying, continue what you're doing, keep the faith, because our next generation, we are in good shape. Everybody talks about, the next generation, but you come to this church and you watch these kids, and the next generation of this church, we're in good shape.
But I would also encourage those that are of the current generation to be open and willing to allow the next generation to step up, because they can. When they are willing, we also have to be willing to allow the successful moments and allow the failures, and then walk together out of those failures to continue serving the Lord. And so it's a willingness on both and all generations to serve the Lord and to be open with Him growing people, because people are messy at all ages.
That it's not about you. It's about being a servant. And the blessings that will come from being a servant will blow your mind.
Be bold. Don't sit back and wait for someone to ask you to do something. Jump in and help. And if you're not sure where or what you're supposed to be serving or helping in, just pick something and start there.
Don't take yourself seriously. God does love you, and He has a plan for your life. It may not always feel wonderful or exciting or always happy, but you can rest assured God has your best interest at heart. So just learn to let go of expectations. Don't take yourself too seriously, and learn to take Jesus very seriously. When you do, it'll be the greatest adventure you'll ever embark on.